Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting edition of Words, Images, and Worlds. I'm delighted on this episode to be talking with a teacher of teachers, a researcher in the world of literacy, an author in the world of literacy. That is Miss Laura Robb. May I
Thank
call
you.
you Laura, or what's the preference there?
Laura is fine.
All
Yeah.
right, all right. You are the author of Teaching Reading in the Middle School, which is one of the books that goes back with me. I started as a middle school teacher. I taught eighth grade for 8 years before I taught college and high school, and so that's a wonderful book that's out in the world. And you also have a book on increasing reading volume that I know that we'll mention as we go through as
Yeah.
well.
Yes. I'm a big believer that the more kids read, the better they get, and the better chance there is of them developing a personal reading life so that when they're adults, they can turn to reading. Uh,
Absolutely.
my granddaughter has been quite ill and has battled leukemia. And
Mm-hmm.
reading and audiobooks have really helped her so much, much more than I think television and things like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I remember, I think we connected in the spring or summer, and you mentioned that your daughter was having some health issues, and so sending care and bibliotherapy, that's the one.
right.
Bibliotherapy, definitely a good thing.
Yes, I know. I sent her a stack of books, and I was down last week. It's my granddaughter, not my daughter,
Oh,
which is
sorry,
yeah.
granddaughter, sorry,
Okay.
yes.
And she said, "Grandma, I have a big stack." I said, "So you'll have a double stack."
Hmm,
So
hmm.
you can choose. You have more choice which one you want to do. And it's fun. She knows I'm really big on reading, so uh,
Hmm.
which is good.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. Uh, Curious about what connected you to this world of reading. What made you inspired you to be sort of a reading advocate?
Well, when I was a little child, a long time ago, um, my parent we were really poor. There were four of us living in a tiny three-room apartment, but my mother took me to two libraries. One, we had to take a bus, so we did that once a week. And one was in the projects about a half a block away from where I lived.
Hmm.
And I went there practically every day. By the time I was 8 or 9, I was able to walk there alone. The librarian knew me. Uh, and books became an important part of my life very early on. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
and then fast forward, when I lived in New York, well, I'll go back first. I lived in New York. I worked in advertising. I was not a teacher. I was an English literature major, a music minor, and never took any education classes. And my husband, who was a singer, took a job at Shenandoah University in Winchester, Virginia.
Hmm.
And there were no advertising agencies. There was nothing there for me to do. And he said, "Why don't you try to teach?" So I put some applications in and I got a job in a country school about 15 miles from the apartment we were renting in the city of Winchester, which is small. And I was teaching sixth grade, replacing the wife of the principal and the only person on staff not related to the principal.
Hmm.
He did not have a high opinion of people from New York, but the central office had hired me. He was in a bind because his wife was having surgery.
Hmm.
I walked into that sixth grade classroom. There were 32 children. There wasn't one book in
Hmm.
that classroom. I had one basal reader that did not satisfy the needs of all the children. There was a small library in a classroom. The books were old and worn, and certainly not books that would interest the kids in my room. So I called my parents because by the time I was older, I was buying books. And they put them, when I left Winchester, they put them in the attic of their house.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Mom, bring those boxes, all of them, because there were my brother's Hardy Boy books and nonfiction books. There were my Nancy Drew books and Bobbsey Twins and a lot of other books. And so they brought about 500 books, and we had a classroom library. And then I did something bold. I wrote to several publishers and I said, my children don't have books. You
Mm-hmm.
send me any books that any extras, anything. And I started getting books from Scholastic, from Penguin. It was very heartening. And the
Yeah.
kids were very excited. And they did a lot of reading. Being an English major and being a reader from, early in my childhood, I wanted those kids to have books and to have that experience of using their imagination and going to other places and bonding with characters. So that's what really started me getting interested in reading and started to read the research on teaching reading, because prior to that, I hadn't done anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I got into it. And I love, I love to talk about reading. I love to go into classrooms. In fact, I will be going back. If my granddaughter's is still in remission, on the 13th, they're going to do some big tests. She'll be up to go to Florida, where they have a little apartment,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to go back to teaching. I have a student who had asked me to mentor her, and I worked with her for a year and a half, but then I had to stop because I couldn't have contact with a lot of people if I was going to visit my granddaughter. But I'm going to go back to that. It's the seventh grade class, and I love it. And so we team teach. I go in 2 or 3 days a week, and it just it lifts my soul and my energy. That's the
Mm-hmm.
only way I can put it. And there's nothing being around students who are yelling, I love this book, and wanting other people, you got to read this or listen to this passage. And so that's what I plan to do.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, and, you are 40 plus years in the teaching profession in one way or another at this point, is that right?
More than 45, if you count the part-time work that I've been doing since I retired. I
Wow.
have I've not had a full year where I have not been in a classroom or more than one classroom. So, and I find that if I'm going to write about reading, I need to be connected
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
the people I'm writing about and writing for.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree, completely agree. Which leads to the practical nature of increasing reading volume as well. So it sounds like access is one of those things for building strong and active readers. And you mentioned keying into the research there as well. Any other ingredients for building strong and active readers that you want to throw into the mix there?
Yes, choice.
Hmm. Hmm.
I want children to have choice. Uh, Independent reading is ideal because I think the teacher can model how you choose a good fit book, and they need to know that it should be fun and easy, that we don't want to struggle when we're
Hmm.
doing independent reading, and the choice to abandon a book. When
Hmm.
I was in school, I couldn't abandon a book. If I didn't like a book, I had to finish it, whether and it was like sitting in front of cream of wheat, which my mother made me sit until she had to release me to go to school because I refused to eat it. It was that same feeling that you have to read a book that you're not connecting with, that you're not interested in. So being able to abandon a book, choice, and having a rich library of culturally relevant books. I was fortunate enough to be able, in my last like 10 or 15 years of teaching, to be able to give children choices in instructional reading.
Hmm.
Um, because I so valued that choice. And once they have choice, there's great investment. It's the same thing in writing. If they can choose their topic, even within the topic of a unit, if you're doing a unit on the Civil War, they can choose their topic, or you're doing a unit on stereotypes or friendship, and then they can write about something that is meaningful to them. If Donald Graves said something years and years ago that really resonated with me, that you have to be in touch, if you're a teacher, with your own literacy life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When you begin to think about the things that make you an active reader, then you can begin to bring those to the table and give those to the children,
Yeah.
so that they begin to feel that they're empowered over their learning lives. And the other thing I do with classroom libraries, I tell teachers every year to make sure the principal sets aside budget money to add books to the class library. And then I have a box with suggestions,
Mm-hmm.
and I ask the kids to suggest books they want to see in the library, or
Love
multiple
it.
copies of books. A book that's really popular, if you only have one copy, it becomes torture for the kid that's third or fourth in line waiting to read it. So those are some things that create active readers, that involve them in their reading lives. And I really believe in that. I like to have choice as a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and as adult in my friendships and relationships with others, and definitely in my reading life.
Yeah.
I want them to have those same choices. So that's important for teachers to do some reflection like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about, excuse me, students I've had this past semester who, when they've chosen a book, because we've taken time to go to our Learning Commons, uh, classroom library, choose books, that they get a little bit into it, and it's almost like they're apologizing, and they're like, "I'm really not into this book." It's like, that's okay. That is okay. I do that all the time. I'll start a book and think, "Oh, this is not for me," and I'll go to something else. So having the agency and the power to do that is totally a great thing.
It's good. And there's something else that it's interesting that you can do. And my son-in-law did it to me before I left Charlottesville 2 days ago. But he gave me a book, and he said, "Laura, you're going to love this, but you got to get through chapter 4."
Yeah.
It's a slow start. And sometimes if we tell that to kids, like sometimes if a kid can't choose a book, and I'll say, well, here are 2 or 3 books, but
Hmm.
this one, you're going to have to go past chapter 2 or chapter 4, uh, and then tell me that you don't like it, and that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah. So again, if you think about the things you do as a reader, why are the children we teach any different?
Hmm.
They have the same needs, uh, and they respond to having a certain amount of control over their choices.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So any particular strategy, idea? You mentioned building classroom libraries. You mentioned administrators supporting that with budget, uh, literacy lives, taking a close look at that. Anything else that you'd like to share with teachers that they can think about?
Yes, to me, one of the most important strategies that a teacher has is the think aloud.
Hmm. Hmm.
I use that think aloud um, as part of my read aloud. And I have 2 levels of a read aloud. One is just for pleasure and joy, and just learning and having fun with a book. I will do think alouds as I'm reading aloud, but
Hmm.
I also use the think aloud as a teaching tool, and transfer it to the kids. So let me be a little more specific. If I'm reading just for pleasure, one of the things that I like to model is how a character makes me feel, or why I'm worried or angry at a character. And I'll stop and I'll say, "Oh, I can't get this feeling out of me." And I said, that's what happens when you're really into a book. because I have found, especially reluctant readers or children who don't have a rich, personal reading life, they're most of them are reading words, but
Mhm.
they're not using their imagination, they're not creating pictures. And I'll stop and say, this is what I see. And I see it so clearly. And I will describe it to the children. So they know that when you read, your emotions and your feelings are very much involved, that you also ask questions, and
Mhm.
you picture things, you use your imagination and you visualize. When I use it as a teaching tool, I'm very, very specific. So one of the things I find with a lot of the children in that come to middle school, not all of them, is they say, well, reading is boring, Mrs. Robin. It's just reading. And what I think they mean, it's just reading words. And
Mhm.
so, as a teaching tool, I will use my read aloud and I'll start by saying, I'm going to show you what goes on in my mind as I'm reading and how it helps me connect and understand to the book. So I'll stop and I'll ask a question. I'll pause and uh, I will apply a strategy. I say, "Oh, look at this! I'm going to infer this about this character because I have all these details and I can understand him better." And as I read aloud, I'm showing them that I'm building comprehension. Comprehension is not a set of questions we answer at the end of the reading, but
Mhm.
comprehension happens from the first word that we read. And so I can do that again and again and again. Sometimes I will just focus on making inferences or comparing and contrasting, because these are important reading strategies and help readers as they're reading. But it's a wonderful thing for children to hear language and the beauty of our language and
Mhm.
words. But then if you take time when they need it to do that, think aloud and show them how you feel, how you're building comprehension, and that comprehension happens all along. And then sometimes I show them how I have to go back and think about something that happened earlier in the story,
Mhm.
or earlier in a poem if I'm sharing a poem. But what you're doing is you're making visible what good readers do. And a lot of
Mhm.
kids don't know that. We assume they know it, but I make no assumptions at all. And the other thing is, eventually, I have kids when they're doing book clubs and they're reading the same book that they've chosen. I have them think aloud,
Mhm. Mhm.
and sometimes they choose. Tell me what you want to think aloud, and share, and they get very excited because once they start thinking aloud, they also do more of that in the head silent thinking,
Mhm.
which is very important. And that's what makes reading magical. It's not just the coding. I, it's interesting. I will never forget this fifth grader. His mother came. For years, I taught fifth grade before I taught middle school. Um, and his mother came in and she said, I'm really mad at you. My son can read the Washington Post. I brought it and I want him to read it to show you because you have him reading books on a third grade instructional level. And I said, he can say the words, but he can't remember the information.
Mhm.
And he can't think or feel with the text. And so if you can just be patient, we'll get him there by the end of the year because he wants to. But reading is more than just holding a newspaper and just blabbing off the words.
Mhm. Mhm.
And she was upset with me until finally things clicked. And then she was very, very excited and she understood that that he was really reading. When we think of reading and comprehension, it's a very complex experience.
Hmm.
So, but and I'm always patient with parents, and listen to them because they love their kids. They want the best for their kids. But the think aloud to me is a premier strategy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
teachers have at their fingertips.
Making that invisible process somewhat visible. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And letting them into your heart and your mind, because reading is not only the mind, it's not only an intellectual thing, but it's the heart. When a book affects the heart, it's like when you cry or you hold your breath and you can't stop reading because you have to find out what's going to happen next.
Hmm.
That's your heart entering into the reading process. And I want kids to know that.
Love it. Love it. As we come to the last question, any resources that you would want to share with teachers, web spaces, any sort of go-to spots if people want to learn more and continue to think about this work?
Well, my son and I have a blog uh, called the Robb Review blog.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a lot of guest writers. Lester Laminack just wrote a wonderful piece on comprehension. Tim Rosinski will be writing one for December and January. It's free. Occasionally, he and I do something on that. But what I think teachers need to do is, if you want to find a book, Google Goodreads, Google the Nerdy Book Club.
Mm-hmm.
These are places where you'll get reviews from readers, and, and you'll be able to find materials. But the Google app is terrific because you can find anything you want. And also, there are lots of blogs for teachers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I would love to talk about for a minute is, I'm going to be part of this big virtual professional learning uh, called
Mm-hmm.
edulink.com.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to launch probably in December or January. Uh, I Next week they're going to be interviewing me, and the interview will be part of my course on independent reading and increasing reading volume, and they'll turn that into um, a PowerPoint, which I will give my approval. And teachers can go on and purchase my books, purchase classroom libraries I've developed with Penguin Random House for pre-K through grade 8. And I'm very excited about that because I think more and more, due to all the things that pull us, and how teaching has becoming so complicated that we have very little free time and budgets are tight, that um, de- professional development will be purchasing a course at a very reasonable price,
Mm-hmm.
watching it, the school purchases it, and then the teachers can watch it at their leisure when they have the time. Um, they can also have virtual professional development and webinars, again, when they have the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to take time off to go to a conference. You have to pay the teacher's expenses, pay for a substitute, and it's only one person who is learning and bringing it back. The whole purpose of this EduLink is that we want to give all teachers in a school, or all teachers in a grade level across the district, opportunities to learn, but when the time is right for them.
Love it. Love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's edulink.com. You can, I'm not sure of the exact launch date, but I'm sure that by January it will be running very well.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, glad to share about that as I share this. And I appreciate your time so very much.
Well, and it's so good to get to know you. And
Yeah.
I'm excited about your book.
Oh,
So
well, thank you.
really, graphic novels are so important. They really are. I love the visuals. I myself love them. Do you have time for one more story?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I loved Wonder Woman comics, and I was not allowed to read comic books. My parents were both very strict about that. And so years ago, when I was young, Life magazine was a big, tall magazine, and they subscribed to it. And so I would put my Wonder Woman comic book in Life magazine and hold it up, and I'd be reading my comic. Well, of course, I got caught. And so what I did, like a good middle schooler, I took all my comics and gave them to my friend who lived in the same apartment building,
Mhm.
and she kept them for me. And whenever I visited her, I read my comics.
Nice.
Yeah, comics are wonderful, you know, and you're getting you're appealing to two parts of a reader, the visual and the text.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so I encourage uh, everyone. I encourage adults to read graphic novels.
absolutely. Same here. Same here. And thanks for mentioning the book. Yeah, as you might have guessed from the number of comics people that are on the podcast, I'm a big fan of comics as well.
Right. Yes. I well, and I love Wonder Woman. I love the movie. It's something from my childhood that started early, and having been deprived, but finding a way to work around it, like most good middle schoolers do. Uh, the joy of reading it has stayed with me. And every graphic novel that goes into a classroom library where I'm coaching a teacher, I read before I put it on the shelf,
Same.
so I can talk to the kids about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's great. We're on the same page, and it really is nice to talk to somebody who is child centered and and gives respects. When you give children choice, it
Hmm.
shows that you value their decisions and you respect their decisions. And that's very important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And may I say, before the interview is over, you are a Wonder Woman of reading. You have become
Oh,
a Wonder Woman. So,
I
uh,
take that badge with great honor.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate the time. Glad to talk anytime, and glad to feature you again to talk something else in the world of reading at some point.
That'll be lovely. Thank you so much. You have a good day. And it's been a delight getting to know you and talking.
Great to talk with you as well.